In de bergen rond het stadje Salo bij het Gardameer in Noord-Italië vormden de Italiaanse fascisten tussen 1943 en 1945 hun laatste bolwerk tegen de oprukkende geallieerde troepen. In deze Italiaanse sociale republiek situeerde de filmmaker en dichter Pier Paolo Pasolini zijn Salo alle 120 giornate di Sodoma, die vanavond zal worden uitgezonden door de VPRO. Pasolini's testament is een gruwelijke vertelling waarin een rechter, bankier, hertog en bisschop zich in een villa overgeven aan een orgie van seks en geweld met tieners.
My reaction is the first time I left the theater. I couldn't sit through it.
Where did you see it?
I think I saw it. I don't remember Italy or America, but I remember that as it's getting more and more and more and more, there was like an automatic reflex action in my leg muscles, pushing me to the floor and causing my rear end to rise from the seat. I could not sit there.
Why?
It was too upsetting. It was too upsetting. And I left the theater. And then I thought, this isn't going to work. If you're writing a book about this man, you got to see the film.
Bart David Schwartz, tegenwoordig journalist bij het blad Fortune, publiceerde in 1992 zijn Pasolini Requiem, de tot nu toe meest uitputtende biografie over de Italiaanse filmmaker en dichter.
I was a lawyer, and I was living in San Francisco, and I was working in a law firm, and I picked up the newspaper one morning, the local newspaper called the San Francisco Chronicle. There was a little tiny article, little thing at the bottom of the page, and it was from AP or UPI, a press agency report, and it said, Pier Paolo Pasolini, 53 years old, noted Italian filmmaker and poet, has been found dead outside of Rome, period. A youth named Giuseppe Pelosi, age 16, was picked up by the police, has confessed to the killing, and says he acted in self-defense when he resisted a sexual advance of the director. End of story. Funeral will be tomorrow. That was it.
Nieuwsgierig gemaakt door het krantenbericht begon Schwartz aanvankelijk aan een filmscenario over Pasolini. 15 jaar lang verzamelde hij alles over de regisseur.
Well, I can tell you about these. They're sort of interesting documents about Pasolini. Let me start with a photograph. This photograph was taken at his country house, which is in a place called Chia, C-H-I-A, outside of Viterbo. This was photographed, I believe, in the summer of 1975, just when Salo had closed filming. And it may have overlapped during the period of the filming of Salo. What he did in that period, and he did throughout his life, was several things at the same time. All his life, he wrote book reviews, and at the same time was producing poetry and a screenplay. Or he was reviewing a book, planning a novel, and reviewing movies. I mean, he was a polymath. He was suffering from being typecast because he had made the so-called trilogy of life, which was first Decameron, and then Canterbury Tales, and then 1001 Nights. And he was in the box. He was the guy who made lavish, historical, costumed epics.
Why do you think he detested that very successful trilogy?
Oh, he said, I rejected because I depicted a world full of cheerful people who were happy, who had sex with each other freely, and who ate and laughed and all this stuff. And he said, that world has been destroyed by consumerism and by the political and economic elite of Italy, which has produced a class of aphasic, conformist, passive generation. That dream that I made in those movies has turned bitter in my mouth. And I have to admit and publicly state that I was wrong. And I don't want that idyllic, mythic world. The boys and girls who are captured in Salo and taken to the villa and tortured and killed don't put up any resistance. And his theory was, and he wrote about this in articles at the time and he talked about it in interviews, was this, and it's a little complicated, but it works. It was that public education in the schools, television, the love of consumer goods, and the need to conform and be like everybody else had completely robbed Italian young people of individuality. Everybody wants to be liked, and everybody wants to be like everybody else. In English, you can make a play on words with like. I want you to like me, and I want to be like you. Similar to and liked by you. And that was his theory. And that in turn, made them idiots, made them passive. He called them aphasic. Aphasic is a kind of disease, aphasia, in which you're not able to formulate thoughts and speak. He said they were aphasic, that they talked in slogans, they talked in proverbial things, jingles from advertising, and that there was no content.
But why did he choose de Sade?
Well, he didn't choose, de Sade chose the story, and it worked perfectly because de Sade was the poet maudit. He was the poet of evil. He was the writer who wrote about the unspeakable. I mean, the message of the Sadean novel is the proverb, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that story fit perfectly in there because Pasolini wanted to say that the institutions of society, represented in the movie he made by an officer of the church, an officer of the court, the entities which maintain stability, can in fact be corrupted, and in the time of Mussolini were in fact corrupt. He wanted to tell that story because he felt that Italy in 1974, 1975 was a corrupted society. And it's fascinating because after his death, we found out that he was right. Because the whole Manipuliti, Tangentopoli, which is the crisis about bribery, which destroyed the Christian Democratic Party, destroyed the Socialist Party, drove Bettinocracy into exile in Tunisia, has put Giulio Andreotti in a courtroom. All that happened after his death.
Vous n'êtes plus un militant politique.
Je le suis plus que jamais. Je n'ai jamais été inscrit à un parti, je suis un indépendant de gauche marxiste, mais je continue à militer plus que jamais.
Est-ce que vous avez parfois la nostalgie de l'époque où les gens vous insultaient dans la rue?
On m'insulte encore aujourd'hui.
Et ça vous cause un certain plaisir?
Je ne le refuse pas, parce que je ne suis pas un moralisateur.
Why did Pasolini choose for the Republic of Salo, the Mussolini time?
Well, it was a traumatic event in recent Italian history. I mean, after all, this is only 1944, 45. There are plenty of people alive now who were alive then. And what happened in Salo was the duly elected head of the government, Prime Minister Benito Mussolini, who was in power from 1922 until at that point for more than 20 years, created a government which allied with the Nazis to make war against the Italian partisans who were trying to throw the Nazis out. If that's not a trauma, I don't know what is. I mean, that's a really traumatic event.
In februari 1975 begonnen in 2 ommuurde villa's ten noorden van Bologna de opnames van Salo. De spelers, die de door de Sade beschreven gruweldaden en martelingen moesten verbeelden, waren voornamelijk amateurs uit de omgeving.
Alors on sait que dans ce film, une centaine de jeunes gens et de jeunes filles sont soumis à un traitement particulièrement cruel et violent. Supplices et puis aussi ces outrages dont on prétend toujours qu'ils sont les derniers. comment avez-vous recruté ces 100 jeunes gens et jeunes filles?
En vérité, j'ai suivi le nombre magique, les nombres magiques de Sade, le nombre 4. Et les victimes sont en tout une vingtaine, non une centaine. Pour les choisir, comme pour les autres films, j'ai rencontré des milliers de gens et j'ai choisi celles qui me semblaient être les meilleures.
Ce sont des acteurs masochistes?
Si je les ai choisis, ça veut dire qu'ils le sont.
De pers werd door Pasolini zorgvuldig op afstand gehouden. Niemand kreeg toestemming de opnames achter de muren en hekken van de villa's schade te slaan.
Pourquoi avez-vous entouré le tournage des 120 jours de Sodome d'un tel mystère?
Ce mystère, parce que toutes les œuvres doivent naître dans le mystère. J'ai essayé de la défendre plus que les autres parce qu'il y avait des dangers immédiats, plus lourds, mais rien de spécial.
Qu'est-ce que vous appelez des dangers immédiats?
L'apparition d'un moraliste qui refuserait le plaisir d'être scandalisé.
Why was it a close?
Because it would make people talk about it, and it sells tickets. And he understood that the movie would be scandalous on that level, and if it was scandalous, people would talk about it. If they would talk about it, he would achieve his goal. And some people probably said, oh, on the set he's having sex with the actors. I don't believe that. I don't think he did. In fact, the reports I get from the still photographer whom I did talk to, and a woman who worked in costume, and from his cousin, Nico Naldini, who was the press head, is that in fact, he seemed rather distant and uninvolved with the crew. He would work during the day, and he didn't socialize much with them. And he didn't go in for picking up actors on the set and having a little affairs with them.
Op 2 november 1975 werd Pasolini in de buurt van Rome op beestachtige wijze vermoord. 2 weken later ging Salo in première tijdens het eerste filmfestival van Parijs. What were the reactions to the film?
They were completely what he knew they would be. And it was shown for one night and then pulled from the screen. It was shown in a cinema called the Pagoda in Paris. For one night, there was a sold-out audience, and then it was removed. And in Italy,
by whom?
By the distributor, because I think there were threats of lawsuits. And there's a mechanism under Napoleonic and civil law, as opposed to common law in England and America, where a person, any person in the public, who feels that they are an aggrieved party, they have been harmed, can initiate an action to start censorship. The public doesn't have to sit there and wait for an official to do it. Anybody can go and denounce something. And that's what happened.
And in Italy?
And in Italy, it was denounced. All these places denounced it. The minute it was going to be shown, it was denounced. And as soon as you begin the denunciation process, the film is withdrawn, pending adjudication.
Est-ce que vous allez être, quand votre dernier film va sortir, il s'intitule Les 120 jours de Sodome, une fois de plus celui par lequel le scandale arrive?
Je pense que scandaliser, c'est un droit. Être scandalisé, c'est un plaisir. Et le refus d'être scandalisé, c'est une attitude moraliste.
Le sexe est-il politique?
Bien entendu.
Et la scatologie?
La scatologie également. Il n'y a rien qui ne soit politique.
Le cannibalisme?
Dans certains milieux, c'est un fait politique réel. Dans d'autres milieux, c'est un fait politique métaphorique.
Avez-vous toujours la même haine des bourgeois et de la bourgeoisie?
Il ne s'agit pas de haine. Il s'agit de quelque chose de plus et de moins en même temps. Malheureusement, à ce point, je dois renoncer à cette espèce de haine, parce qu'en Italie, tous les gens sont devenus des bourgeois.
Et quand ce sont les bourgeois qui font le succès d'un de vos films, est-ce que ça vous attriste?
Il n'arrive jamais que ce soit des bourgeois à décréter le succès d'un film. Ce sont les élites bourgeoises, celles auxquelles j'appartiens, et la masse du public. C'est la masse du public.
Why is it still a shocking film?
Well, it's a shocking film because you are seeing, and you know you are seeing, the torture, and the camera doesn't blink, of innocent people, completely innocent people. He said in interviews, I want these boys and girls to be completely good. They didn't deserve it. They didn't do anything to merit their treatment. There is nothing we know about them that indicates that they were, for example, soldiers, where we think killing an enemy, even though he hasn't done anything to you, is okay. No, they were completely innocent. And at that point, what you're watching is extremely painful because they are en franc. They're like Jews in the Holocaust, or they're like Armenians in the Turks, or they're like the victims of Pol Pot in Cambodia. They are people who are just living their lives not bothering anybody, who happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that is so painful.
Has it also something to do with the style of the film?
The style of the film, it does, because the film is, critics would call it hieratic, cold. It's a series of tableaux, and it just rolls inevitably forward, and it's cold. It's almost documentary, because there's a scene, and then the screen goes blank for a minute, and then there's a black screen and words on it announcing the next scene, the circle of shit or the circle of blood, and then you see that, and it's getting worse and more violent, and boom, the next one. And it just goes inexorably worse and worse and worse and worse. And there's no way out. In fact, at one point there is a gesture of rebellion in which a boy and a girl unite to try and survive, and they're caught, and you think, oh, you begin immediately to identify with them and to root for them. And they're both shot dead. The theory goes like this, that if you are able to conceive of a story like this and film it, then you must be like them, which is a breathtakingly stupid notion. First of all, the story is sad. It's in Sade. Pasolini took Sade, transposed it, and filmed it without changing. The circle of blood, the circle of shit, the executions, all that is in the novel. Secondly, there is somehow the idea that violent men make violent movies, sweet men make sweet movies, something like that. It doesn't work. It is a fallacy.
Why you have to see this film?
You don't have to see this film.
No, but why is it interesting if you have to explain to someone that Pasolini, the famous film director and poet, has made this film? It's a horrible film to see for
you learn a lot from the film.
Okay, what?
All right. What you learn from the film is that people can do horrible things to other people.
But you know that.
I don't know that people grow up knowing that. I was never told anything that terrible. My parents never sat me down and described to me genocide or the Holocaust or child abuse or anything like that. You'll learn something important about the world.
What?
You will learn that in the world, if human beings are not restrained by other human beings who have made laws that people must obey, or they are punished for not obeying them, that if people are above laws and controls, they will behave like monsters. given the opportunity. Pasolini's right is to decide how strong it has to be to get the idea across. Apparently, he really wanted it to be incredibly powerful. I think he wanted to communicate the idea that power unrestrained, Nazism and fascism unrestrained, and maybe, and here I'm extrapolating, human nature unrestrained, can do something that is so terrible that you can hardly bear to see it and imagine it. That it's the massacre of the innocents. And that's all. 20 years after it's made, we're talking about it, and it's survived and made an impact. That's something. I mean, if what he meant to do was to make people think about the subject that he made the theme of his movie, he obviously succeeded brilliantly.
Dan nu de laatste uit de korte reeks Pasolini-films Salo. Vanaf 16 jaar. En bent u ouder, moet u het zelf maar weten.